Hello, welcome to my seminar presentation, which aims to outline some of the things I discovered in my report entitled Speech-Dependent and Independent Systems Evaluated for Individuals with Intellectual Disability and Dysarthric Speech. We have a lot to get through, so let's all belt up now and get on our way. In this seminar, I plan to do the following. I will outline my journey. I will outline the research gap that I discovered. I will tell you about the experiments I conducted, as well as the results. And I will outline the implications of the research I have done. I have almost 25 years of experience in the disability sector. My disability experience has given me a real interest in adaptive technology. In my recent research, I became interested in speech recognition technology, where there's been great advancement in recent years. However, progress has proceeded much more slowly for people who have impaired or dysarthric speech. Dysarthria is impaired speech that is caused by a lack of control of the muscles that control speech, and is caused by various things such as cerebral palsy or stroke. Despite the work that has been going on, there has been little research into the link between dysarthric speech, intellectual disability, and speech recognition software. Speech disorders are common for people with intellectual disability. An intellectual disability occurs when someone has an IQ that is 70 or below. Intellectual disability makes it difficult for someone to learn new skills. Speech recognition systems might be quite useful for people with intellectual disability. Smart speaker systems such as Google Home can lead to better speech from those using them. The well-being of people with intellectual disability is threatened by their communication impairments. And people with intellectual disability also lack literacy. So speech recognition systems allow them to access information technology. My aim in my research was to bridge the gap somewhat. For this study, I recruited 3 people who had an intellectual disability and dysarthric or impaired speech. I also recruited 2 regular control voices for the study. For this study, I also used voices from the Targo database, which is a Canadian database of dysarthric voices. I used 2 male dysarthric voices, as well as 2 regular male voices from the database. The recruited participants used a word list that was based off environmental control systems. A list of single words that had been recorded in the Targo database were selected for the Targo database voices. The first piece of software used for the experiments was called Speech Texter. It works in the Chrome browser and on Android devices. Google Speech is the speech recognition system behind it. The reason for using Speech Texter is that it can be manually adjusted. So if the system misrecognizes a word, it can be corrected so it recognizes the correct word. Speech Texter is speaker independent. Speaker independent systems means that it is not based off the individual speaker, but on a model based off numerous speakers. The other piece of software that was chosen was VoiceIt. It runs as an iOS app. It is speaker dependent and is specifically made for people with speech issues. VoiceIt can act like a translator between the person who has dysarthric speech and the people they are trying to communicate with. VoiceIt is speaker dependent, which means its model is based off the individual's voice. Due to time constraints, I did not measure the accuracy of the software or the word error rate. Instead, I measured whether the systems could make a model of the speech and be modified in some way to make it recognize the correct speech. For the first set of experiments, I recorded the voices of 2 of the participants and 2 of the control voices reciting their word lists. These recordings, as well as the Targo voices, were played to SpeechTexter and VoiceIt to see how they would respond. For the second set of experiments, PM3 and PC1 spoke directly into SpeechTexter and VoiceIt. This graph represents the results of the first set of experiments. The blue line represents SpeechTexter's performance with no corrections. The orange line represents SpeechTexter's performance with corrections. The grey line is VoiceIt's performance. Overall, it shows that VoiceIt performed better than SpeechTexter. VoiceIt was much better at processing the speech of the Dysarthric voices than SpeechTexter. Intriguingly, both systems had problems deciphering the voices of the Targo database, both the Dysarthric ones and the regular ones. This graph represents the result of the second set of experiments. It shows that SpeechTexter was able to process PM3's voice, but it needed a lot of corrections to get to 95%, whereas VoiceIt was able to process 100% of his speech.
Firstly, let's talk about the Targo database before talking about other things. The Targo database's quality was rather like the audio you're listening to now. My conclusion is that maybe it shouldn't be used for research as it currently is being used.
With that issue aside, we can now say that VoiceIt outperforms SpeechTexter. It indicates that for people with intellectual disability and dysarthric or impaired speech, speech-dependent systems have a clear advantage. It also has the advantage of being able to deal with idiosyncratic speech. However, in the future, speech-independent systems may have a place for this cohort. Google's Project Euphonia is currently collecting thousands of examples of speech from dysarthric voices. This may have an effect on how effective speech-independent systems will be in the future. This research had some limitations. The first set of experiments only had one single recording from each voice of each word. Future research in this area will need to measure accuracy, not just the ability of speech recognition systems to model speech. There will also be a need to formalize assessment of participants. In this presentation, I've outlined my journey. I've shown that there's a research gap of intellectual disability, dysarthric speech, and speech recognition. I outlined the experiments I undertook to test a speech-dependent and a speech-independent system on people with impaired speech and intellectual disability. The results show that the speech-dependent systems work best for this cohort. I outlined some of the implications of this research. Thanks for watching this presentation. If you're interested to know more, you can read my full report, but otherwise, all the best. Thank you.